Do you wish that you could predict the future? Do you wish that you could even go back to maybe, let's say, 2019 and know that 2020 would be what we found out that it was going to be and prepared for it? You were ready for it. So when it showed up in March 2020, you were ready for it. Do you wish that you could look out the next 5 or 10 years and know the changes that are going to happen in your church, in your congregation, in your community, even at a national level, and have an understanding of what decisions you needed to make today in order to put your church in a better position to be effective, to be impactful, and to keep going long into the future? Do you wish that that was your reality? Well, today what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about how you can actually make that your reality. Maybe not necessarily predict the future, but you can definitely have an idea of what is coming down the road, how you can see ahead, and how you can prepare today for the future that's coming. So let's get started. So the big question is this: how do pastors like us who remain focused on the mission of Jesus and serving our communities without being distracted by everything in the world around us, how do we increase our effectiveness while living a lifestyle that doesn't compromise our health, our families, or our personal relationships with Jesus? That's the question this podcast is going to answer. I'm Dr. Brandon Party Cooper, and welcome to the Ministry Hackers Podcast. Welcome to this episode of the Ministry Hackers Podcast. I hope you're doing wonderfully. I hope wherever you are and whatever it is you're doing, your day is going great. Things are going really well here in Virginia Beach. Wonderful fall day here, enjoying the nice weather, enjoying the kids being back to school, enjoying football, just enjoying fall. It's my favorite time of year. I love Christmas. That little 3 or 4 week window in December is wonderful, but I love the fall season. And so I hope the fall is going well for you. Hope ministry is going well. Your church planning season is going well so far, that you're getting ready for next year, preparing, doing all the budgets and calendars and everything you need to do to be thinking ahead for what's coming in the coming year. I'm so glad that you're here, because today is the beginning of a conversation that I love to have, and I have often with different people, because one of my degrees, one of the things that I do, and one of the areas of study that I have is in strategic foresight. And people are always asking, so what's your doctorate in? And my doctorate is in strategic leadership foresight. And everybody goes, oh, what is that? And so usually then the conversation goes and I explain what strategic foresight is. And what I want to do today is I want to take that conversation that I've had probably 100 times now with different people. I want to take that conversation, I want to bring it here and talk about strategic foresight and how it can impact you, it can impact your church, and it can impact the future of what you are doing, what God has called you to do, the vision and the mission that He's laid on your heart, how you can make that happen by using strategic foresight. But first, I just want to ask you a question. And the question that I want to ask you is, when you drive around your town, when you look around in your city, are there these large churches that are scattered throughout your neighborhoods and your city? Are there these large churches that are beautiful and ornate, and you know that there's a ton of history there, but you also know that every Sunday there is a small handful of people that meet, and it's really only a shell of what it once was back in the day? What all of these churches are, these churches that we see, and I love these old church buildings, but it breaks my heart because when I see them, I immediately know most of them have very small congregations, and some of them have closed their doors entirely. And it breaks my heart because what they are monuments more than churches. And they're monuments to a point in time in history where some change happened and the church was unable to navigate it. The church was unable to change. They were unable to pivot. They were unable to do whatever was needed to remain a vibrant, lively, healthy church. And so as great as these buildings are and as beautiful as they may be, every time I see them, I think that's a monument to a church that maybe couldn't make the adjustment from singing hymns to singing worship courses. Or maybe they couldn't make the adjustment from Sunday school to small groups. Or maybe they just felt like, the shift to hiring staff members was just not something they wanted to do, and they were going to keep their church working fully on volunteers and one lead pastor. Whatever the change was, they were unable to navigate it and unable to make the shift that was necessary. And it breaks my heart to see that. And I don't want that to happen to you. I don't want to see it happen to other churches. And I don't want it to see it kind of navigate forward and see how that just how it can simply become a testimony to how the world can beat the church down. That's not what I want to see. And I don't want to see it for you. And so that's why today I want to talk about what it looks like to exercise strategic foresight and how it can help you. Now, one of my favorite movie series is the Middle Earth series. So Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, and now we have the Rings of Power show that's come on. I love all of that. I love anything Tolkien. I love just the whole background. And one of my favorite parts, or a moment that comes to mind when I'm talking about strategic foresight, is this moment at the end of the first Hobbit movie. All the dwarves and Gandalf and Bilbo, they're all standing at the top of this big precipice where the eagles had landed them after their battle with the orcs, and they're looking out across this wide terrain. And Thorin just happens to look deep on the horizon, and he sees this huge mountain rising up from the horizon. And it's the Lonely Mountain. It's the place that they're trying to get to. It's where their journey is going to end. And in between the Lonely Mountain and that precipice that they're standing on, they can see all the terrain in front of them, everything that's going to happen in front of them, all the hills and all the valleys and all the forests and all the rivers. All of that is laid out in front of them, and they can see what stands between them and the Lonely Mountain. And that's a great picture of what strategic foresight really is. What strategic foresight is you're on a journey, and instead of just slogging along through your day with your head down and doing whatever necessary things are happening, you're reacting to this and reacting to that. There's a knock on the door and there's a phone call. And instead of that, you take a moment, even if it's just an hour, and you pick your head up and you look across the horizon and you begin to ask the questions, what are we going to have to navigate in the future? What are we going to have to do? What are we going to have to work around? What changes are coming that are going to impact how we do ministry, how we do church, how people learn, how people grow, how people engage with Scripture? What are the changes that are coming down the pipe that we need to be prepared for? That's what strategic foresight really is. So let me give you an actual definition. So Andy Hines, and he's a strategic foresight strategist. What he says is strategic foresight is a process that learns from the past, uses the present to determine critical issues for the future, and then visualizes the future in multiple ways to positively influence the present and the future. Which, in other words, what strategic foresight really is it's the ability to better understand the probable futures, because we all know that there are thousands of possible futures, but there are a handful of probable ones. You know, when we get up in the morning, we have a pretty good idea of how our day is going to go. Now, could it get adjusted here or there and things happen? Sure. But the probable future that we're looking at the end of this day is probably not something tragic or something unexpected or something completely out of the ordinary. We have a pretty good idea what's happening today. Well, a month from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, even 5 years from now, there are probable futures that we can have a good handle on and we can start preparing for. And that's really what Andy Hines is getting at, is what are the probable futures that we're going to face and how can we prepare to navigate them? Now, 2020 dealt all of us a hand that we were not prepared for. And what global events like the pandemic do is they accelerate change. Well, the reality is that there are a lot of churches, and maybe you were one of these. Maybe you pastor a church where you were prepared for the 2020 global pandemic. And not that you saw a pandemic coming, but that you were able to see the trends that were happening. You were able to see the move to online church. You were able to see the move to online learning. You were able to see the shifts that were happening in the undercurrents, the things that if you took the time, we knew church was moving this direction. Well, maybe you saw that. And when 2020 happened, all you really did was just pivot away from what you were doing most of the time and pivoted towards the things you were doing some of the time. And those some of the time things became all the time things because we couldn't meet uh, live services every Sunday. And you didn't abandon the things that you were doing. It's just the things that you were doing all of the time now became things you were doing not at all. And then over time, it became things you were doing a little bit. And then over time, a little bit more until you finally returned to what you were normally doing. However, what you were doing just a little bit became doing all the time. And maybe now you're still doing as well as the other stuff. You're doing online church as well as your normal everyday Sunday services like you had for years and years and years before. Maybe that was you. Maybe you were prepared because the acceleration of change happened with the pandemic and you were already prepared. Most of us, though, most of us were not prepared. We maybe had dabbled in online church. Maybe we were against online church and said, I'm not going to do that. That's not who we are. That's not what we're going to do. And so when 2020 happened, when COVID-19 hit and March came and we had to shut our doors, we were caught in, I don't know what to do. How do we figure this out? We were scrambling for equipment. We were scrambling for platforms. We were scrambling to understand the technology. Some of us, we were stuck in these philosophical battles of what ministry really is and what it should be and how to do it and how not to do it, and we were unable to really navigate those first weeks and months well because we weren't prepared for the change that was coming. Now, again, none of us saw 2020, the pandemic and COVID-19 and everything that would play out. None of us really saw that coming. But some of us were better prepared than others because we saw the horizon, we saw what was coming, and we had already exercised a degree of strategic foresight in order to be prepared for what was coming down. What you and I can be sure of, and what we can know, is that change is coming. It's always coming. It's the one thing that we can count on, is that change is going to happen. And we've navigated some pretty significant changes over the years. Again, we navigated away from Sunday school into small groups. We navigated to online church. We navigated to online databases and online check-in systems. And we navigated towards, changes in how we function our security and how we protect our kids and our students. We've navigated some of those changes. But there are other changes coming down the road. And the question is are you ready for them, or are you going to try and navigate them as they come? What we know about those churches that we see around our town, the ones that seem like monuments, what we know is that at some point a change came and they tried to react to it and they couldn't do it. And maybe it took years, maybe it even took a couple of decades for that church to really die out. And they held on hope that maybe they could have figured out a way. But at the end of the day, there was a change that needed to happen that they were unable to do. Whether it was they were ill prepared or just simply couldn't make the change. And you and I, right now, today in 2022, there are changes coming that are going to impact the way we do church, the way we do ministries, the way we function, the way people engage with us. We're seeing it all the time. We're seeing this shift away from discipleship and away from understanding biblical truths. And we have a growing number of Christians who don't even know their Bible. So how does that impact the way we do church? Will we continue the way we're doing it, or do we have to make changes today to fix the problem before it becomes a problem we can't fix anymore? Change is coming. We all know that, and we know that we need to prepare for it. And by exercising strategic foresight, what we're able to do is identify the changes that need to be made, identify the things that are coming down, the trends that are happening. And what I want to do over these next few weeks is talk to you about how to exercise strategic foresight and how you can start preparing not just for next year, but for 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Maybe you are a pastor who maybe you're looking at retiring in 10 years, and you want to make sure that the church is in a position for you to retire well and them to continue on without you. Or let's say maybe you're preparing to build a building, and you want to know the things that you need to implement in the building process so that in 10 years after your church is built, you're not dealing with things that you weren't prepared for. You built a building that was ready to sustain some of the changes that are coming down. Because there are changes that are happening. And if you build a building that the way people have been building church buildings for the last 15, 20 years, you're going to build a building that's irrelevant in 5 years. And strategic foresight gives you the ability to not make those mistakes. And so what we're going to do over these next few weeks is I'm going to walk you through a very simple process on how to exercise strategic foresight. I want to give you just an overview of what that looks like. And so the first step that we're going to look at in the next episode is we're going to look at how you do framing. And what framing is using a SWOT analysis to determine what change you're going to focus on. Because you and I both know in our churches, there are hundreds of changes we can make. There are so many things that we could spend our time trying to figure out. So when we frame it, we determine, okay, we're going to look at this. We're going to look at small groups, or we're going to look at discipleship, or we're going to look at how sermon development is impacting the church and how we need to navigate through that. We're going to frame our scope so that we understand what we're focusing on. Then the second step is horizon scanning. What we're going to do is we're going to look across the horizon and we're going to recognize the trends. Just like the hobbits, just like in The Hobbit, the dwarves, what they do, they stand on that precipice, they look out and they can see the rivers and they can see the forest and they can see which way they're going and they can navigate through it. Well, that's what horizon scanning is. Horizon scanning is looking across the horizon and identifying, here are the trends. These are the things that are happening. These are the things that are impacting us. Church attendance is dropping. And so how do we need to, that's a trend we need to understand. Or the move away from scripture being absolute truth is changing. So that's a trend that we need to understand. And so how do we understand that? How do we understand how that's going to, how impact the future that we're walking into? So that's the second step. The third step is trend analysis. So now we have the trends. Let's analyze those. Let's understand not only the direction they're going and how they're going to change, but do they cross? And when they cross, when two trends cross, what happens? What future can we expect? What reality is that going to create when those two trends come into contact? The fourth step is scenario planning. That's where we look at probable futures. So we've done our trend analysis, and now we can say, okay, here are the probable futures. This is what we think is going to happen based on what we're looking at. And then the next step is preferred future. Out of all the scenarios that we've created, this is the one that we want to happen. This is the one that we want to see happen in our church. We want to see happen in our ministries. We want to see happen in our community. This is the trend, this is the future that we are wanting to happen. Understanding that God may change things, that, catastrophic events could take place and shift that. But if everything remains the same, this is our preferred future that we're going to aim at. Once we have our preferred future, then we start doing the strategic planning part. And this is different than planning. Most of us, when we plan, we look back. We look in the past and we say, okay, this is what has happened and this is where we want to go. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create a plan based on what has happened and where we want to go. But it doesn't take into account all of the trends and all the horizon scanning and all the changes and shifts that are going to happen in the future. So what strategic planning does at this point is say, okay, here's where we're wanting to go. Here's our preferred future. Here are all of the factors that could play into it. So how do we create a strategic plan to get to our preferred future, navigating the challenges and difficulties and obstacles that are lying in front of us? And then finally, implementation. We'll talk about how you can implement this plan, this strategic plan, implement it into your staff, implement it into your volunteer system, and really ultimately implement it into the culture of your church. So your church as a whole congregation, culturally, they're looking forward, they're looking to the future, they're looking to what God is wanting them to do, what God is looking to do in you and through you, looking ahead to the future that God is taking you into, rather than looking at the past and longing for the past and longing for something that has gone by. It gets the congregation looking forward, building a culture that's future-oriented, that celebrates the past, but really strives for the future. And that's the process that we're going to walk through. So over the next few weeks, we're going to walk through that step by step. I'm going to show you how to implement those steps, how to carry them through, how to bring your staff, your board, other leaders into the process. And we're going to see how you, through the course of the rest of this year, how you can start putting together a strategic plan to get ready for 2023 and whatever years follow. Okay, I know this might be, it may seem like a lot, it may seem overwhelming just on first blush, but I promise you, strategic foresight is a fun practice. It's fun to get into. It's fun to dream. It's fun to imagine. It's fun to think about the future. But more importantly, it's practical. It helps you navigate changes that are coming so that you're ready for them when they come. And that's the whole goal here. That's what we're wanting to do. And if you walk with me through this process over these next few weeks, you're going to discover how impactful this process can be in your church, in your congregation, and in your life. And that's one of the things that we really focus on here at Ministry Hackers is we want you to live a lifestyle that is impactful, but is also healthy and strong and living up to everything you imagine it to be. And so that's why I want to also invite you. I want to invite you to go to brandonpartycooper.com/more time, more money. And right there, what you're going to find a step-by-step process that's going to walk you through how to move from a ministry that's overwhelming, that is stressful, that you're dealing with anxiety, even maybe dealing with depression. Move away from all of that and move into a growing, healthy ministry where you're able to spend time with your family, spend time with your friends, do the things you love, have your hobbies, maybe even travel. If you love to go golfing or you love to go hiking or you love to go fishing, whatever it is you love to do, how you can have a growing church and a growing ministry while at the same time having the margin in your time and the margin in your money to enjoy all the things that God has blessed you with. Again, go to brandonpartycooper.com/more time, more money. Get your free guide, get your step-by-step guide. You can start today and start moving towards that lifestyle that God's created for you, that he wants you to walk into, and that you deeply desire, even though you may not always admit it. So go there, brandonpartycooper.com/more time, more money. Get your guide and get started today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you so much for joining me here on the podcast, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.